When someone thinks about you but refuses to reach out, it creates a silence that is louder than words, a distance that feels heavier than rejection, because deep down you can sense their presence even in their absence. You feel them in quiet moments, late nights, and sudden emotional waves that come without warning, and you ask yourself why, if they are thinking about you, they don't just text, call, or say something. But the truth is, this silence is not empty, it is full of fear, ego, pride, unresolved emotions, and internal battles they are too afraid to face, because when a person truly thinks about you but chooses not to reach out, it means your presence still has power over them, and that power scares them more than losing you ever did, because reaching out would mean admitting they miss you, admitting they still care, admitting that letting you go didn't erase what you meant, and for many people, that admission feels like weakness, like surrender, like reopening a wound they pretend has healed. So instead of honesty, they choose distance, instead of vulnerability, they choose silence, and instead of connection, they choose control, even though that control slowly eats them from the inside, because silence does not mean absence of feelings, it often means the presence of too many feelings at once, feelings they don't know how to handle, feelings that threaten the image they built to survive without you. And this is why you feel confused, because your intuition is not lying. Energy does not lie. When someone thinks about you repeatedly, their energy reaches you. It shows up as restlessness, sudden memories, emotional heaviness, dreams, or an unexplained pull toward them. And the reason you feel it is because emotional bonds do not break just because communication stops. They break only when both hearts release, and in this situation, only one side is trying to let go while the other is silently holding on, trapped between desire and fear, between longing and pride, because reaching out would mean risking rejection, and for someone who already feels vulnerable, that risk feels unbearable, so they choose the safety of silence even though it hurts more in the long run. And this is where psychology explains what spirituality already knows, that when a person suppresses emotions instead of expressing them, those emotions don't disappear, they intensify, they turn inward, creating anxiety, regret, and emotional conflict. And this is why the person who refuses to reach out often suffers more than the one who is being ignored, because the ignored person eventually learns to live without answers, but the silent thinker lives with constant internal dialogue, rehearsing conversations that never happen, typing messages that are never sent, imagining outcomes that never come, and every time they stop themselves from reaching out, they reinforce a belief that they are not allowed to feel, that their emotions are dangerous, that vulnerability equals loss of control, and over time this emotional suppression builds pressure like a dam holding back water, and eventually something cracks, because emotions demand expression, they always do, and if not through communication, then through pain, sleeplessness, emotional numbness, or sudden breakdowns. And the most painful part is that while they are fighting this internal war, you are left wondering if you ever mattered, if you were easy to forget, if silence means indifference. But silence is often the language of someone who cares too much but feels powerless, someone who thinks about you daily but believes reaching out would destroy the fragile balance they built to survive without you. Because sometimes people don't stay away because they don't care, they stay away because they care too much and don't trust themselves to handle the emotions that would resurface if they open that door again. And this is where ego plays its strongest role. Ego is not confidence, ego is fear wearing armor. Ego says, don't reach out, you'll look weak. Ego says, if they wanted you they would have stayed. Ego says, protect yourself. But ego never asks, is this silence hurting both of us? And ego never prioritizes healing, only control. And this is why many connections die, not because love faded, but because pride spoke louder than truth. And when someone thinks about you but refuses to reach out, it also means they are watching from a distance, paying attention quietly, noticing your growth, your changes, your absence, and every sign of your moving on triggers both relief and pain. Relief because it confirms they don't have to act, pain because it reminds them they are being left behind emotionally, and this creates a paradox. They want you to miss them, but they also fear you moving on. They want to feel important, but they don't want to take responsibility for reconnecting. And this internal contradiction keeps them stuck, frozen between action and avoidance. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to break the silence, because time turns hesitation into habit, and habit turns fear into identity, and eventually they convince themselves that silence is the only option left, not realizing that silence has already cost them the chance to heal, reconnect, or even gain closure. And this is where the spiritual truth emerges, that sometimes God or the universe allows silence not as punishment, but as protection, because if someone is thinking about you but refuses to reach out, it may be because they are not emotionally ready to meet you at the level you deserve, and reaching out would only reopen wounds without resolution, and you are being protected from half-effort, from confusion, from emotional instability disguised as longing, because real connection requires courage, honesty, and emotional responsibility, not silent longing and unspoken feelings. And if someone cannot reach out despite thinking about you, it means they are still imprisoned by fear, ego, or unresolved pain. And while that is human, it is not something you are meant to carry, because your role is not to wait endlessly for someone to overcome themselves. Your role is to continue growing, healing, and choosing peace. And this is why the silence, as painful as it feels, may be guiding you towards self-respect, because chasing someone who refuses to act teaches them that silence has no consequences. But choosing yourself teaches them that silence has a cost, and often it is only after you stop waiting, stop hoping, stop checking, that the reality of your absence truly hits them, because silence only feels safe when the other person is still emotionally available. But when you emotionally detach, when your energy withdraws, the silence becomes unbearable, and that is when many people finally reach out, not because they suddenly found courage, but because they finally felt the loss they were trying to avoid. And whether they reach out or not, the deeper lesson remains the same, that someone thinking about you but refusing to reach out is not a reflection of your worth, it is a reflection of their emotional capacity at that moment. And you must never confuse someone's fear with your value, because you are not hard to love, you are simply not meant to be loved in silence, you are meant to be chosen openly, communicated with honestly, and held without hesitation. And if someone cannot meet you there, then their silence, painful as it feels, is not rejection, it is redirection, guiding you toward connections where thought turns into action, where feelings are expressed, and where love does not hide behind pride. When someone thinks about you but still refuses to reach out, the reason often lives far deeper than ego or pride. It lives in the subconscious patterns they developed long before they ever met you, patterns shaped by past relationships, childhood attachment wounds, emotional neglect, abandonment experiences, and learned survival strategies, because the human mind does not respond to love based on logic. It responds based on conditioning, and for some people, closeness does not feel safe even when it is desired, because closeness reminds them of loss, disappointment, or emotional pain they once experienced and never fully healed from. So when they think about you, their heart moves forward, but their nervous system pulls them back, creating an internal conflict where desire and fear exist at the same time. And this is one of the most painful psychological states a person can be in, because they are not free to act on what they feel, they are trapped inside themselves constantly, monitoring their emotions, questioning their impulses, and suppressing their truth. And this suppression often comes from a deep fear of emotional exposure, because reaching out is not just sending a message, it is opening the door to vulnerability. It is saying, you still matter to me. And for someone who learned that caring leads to loss, that vulnerability feels dangerous. So instead of risking rejection or emotional pain, they choose distance, because distance feels like control, even if it costs them connection. And psychology shows us that many people would rather feel the pain they know than risk the pain they don't. So they tolerate longing, regret, and emotional tension because those feelings feel familiar, while reaching out feels unpredictable, uncertain, and threatening to their sense of emotional safety. And this is where avoidant attachment patterns emerge, because avoidant individuals often crave connection deeply, but when connection becomes possible, their fear response activates, telling them to pull away, to self-protect, to stay silent, and this creates a cycle where they think about you intensely, idealize moments, replay memories, and imagine reconnection. But the moment action becomes possible, anxiety replaces longing, and silence becomes their shield, because silence allows them to feel without being seen, to miss without being accountable, and to care without risking rejection. And while this might protect them temporarily, it slowly damages their emotional health, because unexpressed emotions do not fade, they accumulate, they create mental noise, emotional exhaustion, and internal pressure that shows up as irritability, numbness, or sudden emotional breakdowns. And this is why someone who refuses to reach out often appears calm on the outside but feels restless on the inside, because their mind is constantly negotiating between what they feel and what they allow themselves to express. And this internal negotiation is exhausting, because every time they stop themselves from reaching out, they reinforce a belief that their feelings are unsafe, that connection leads to pain, and that silence is the only way to survive. And over time, this belief becomes part of their identity, making it even harder to break the pattern, because now silence feels like who they are, not just something they do. And another deeper psychological reason is fear of loss of power, because reaching out means surrendering control over the outcome. It means accepting that the other person might not respond the way they hope, and for someone who equates control with safety, that surrender feels terrifying. So they choose silence, because silence allows them to control the narrative, to imagine outcomes without facing reality, to preserve the illusion that they still have a choice, even if that choice is doing nothing. And this illusion of control is comforting, but it also prevents healing, because healing requires confrontation, and confrontation requires courage. And this is where regret quietly grows, because regret is not born from rejection, It is born from inaction, from the words never spoken, the messages never sent, and the chances never taken, and the mind remembers missed opportunities more painfully than failed attempts, which is why years later, people regret not reaching out more than they regret being honest, because honesty brings closure, but silence leaves questions unanswered, and this is why someone who thinks about you but refuses to reach out often carries you longer than they admit, because unresolved emotions linger, they attach themselves to memory, to fantasy, to what-ifs, and every time they see something that reminds them of you, the emotional wound reopens quietly, and yet they still don't reach out because by now, silence has become familiar, and familiarity feels safer than vulnerability, and on the other side, you may feel the emotional pull because emotional bonds do not require communication to exist, they exist through shared experiences, emotional resonance, and unprocessed attachment, and this is why you feel their absence so strongly because the bond was never fully resolved, but this does not mean you are meant to wait, it means you are meant to understand that their silence is about their internal limitations, not your worth, and this understanding is crucial because without it, you may internalize their silence as rejection, as proof that you were not enough, when in reality you may have been too emotionally significant, too impactful, too real for someone who was not ready to confront themselves, and the deeper truth is that someone who thinks about you but refuses to reach out is often standing at the edge of growth, because growth begins where comfort ends, and silence is comfortable for them, even if it is painful, and until they choose discomfort, until they choose honesty over avoidance, they remain stuck, repeating the same patterns in different forms, and this is why the universe sometimes keeps them at a distance from you, not because the connection lacked meaning, but because reconnecting without emotional growth would only recreate the same pain, and you are being guided toward emotional maturity, toward relationships where thought turns into action, where feelings are communicated, and where silence is not used as protection but as reflection. And if they ever reach out, it will not be because they stop thinking about you, it will be because they finally learned to face what they were running from,